All right, my guest this week on the Dragzine Podcast is current and reigning NMCA Pro Mod champion Eric Gustafson. What's going on, Eric?
Hey, how's it going?
Doing good, man. Doing good. Getting ready to kick off my racing season here in just a couple of days. I'll be wheels up heading to Florida here for the U.S. Street National. So it'll be nice to hear some engines fired in anger finally.
Absolutely. We'll be down there as well. We're looking forward to it. And thanks for having me on the show today.
No problem, man. No problem. It's great to have you on. I saw where Jason Lee is already trying to book grud races for you and everything else on Facebook. So you might end up having a pretty full dance card in a hurry.
Well, that's Jason. He likes to stir the pot and have some fun. Keeps everybody on their toes for sure. But he'll actually be driving the car this weekend. So
Wow.
I'm a bit out of commission right now. You can't really see on the camera, but I was in a bad car wreck mid-November and broke my humerus bone in my left arm. So I'm a ways away from driving. So it's going to be Jason behind the wheel. So he's going to have to back those words up, or whatever he says or types on Facebook, he's going to have to back it up.
I've raced against Jason Lee with the guy I crew for a long time. And if there is anybody that can back smack talk up, it is that dude. Because a lot of the younger guys don't realize that back in the day, he did a lot of wheeling and won a lot of races. He's pretty gnarly behind the wheel.
Jason's an excellent driver. Besides just being a great tuner, great friend, both he and Patrick do a phenomenal job behind the scenes and behind the screen on the computers. But Jason can definitely wheel a car. And we saw that against David Reese at Duck's Race when he treated him. That was an incredible win. When we were pretty much down on power against him, and it looked like we'd lose in that semifinal race. And that whole shot victory took us to the finals. He did a fantastic job that weekend.
That was almost criminal what he did to Reese on the tree. That was it was one of those things where you see people online trying to prognosticate who's going to win. I'm like, don't sleep on these guys. They got good equipment. They know what they're doing. And lo and behold, there you go.
Yeah, I was definitely, let's say, I had all the confidence in the world in Jason, always do. But, it's drag race. You never know what's going to happen. Yeah, and that was certainly a testament to you never know what's going to happen. I think it wasn't on camera. I've been looking for any video out there. I'm sure now people are going to be scouring the internet for it. But I was jumping up and down, so excited. I had a cocktail in one hand and a cigar in the other while I was in the starting line because I wasn't driving. And when I landed, I got right in the glue, lost my balance, and fell on the starting line. And then I couldn't get up. I was stuck in the glue. It was pretty comical. But we have yet to find any video of it. Certainly, Jay would love to find it so he can embarrass me with that at some point.
Nice. That's I've seen a lot of interesting celebrations on the starting line, but I would like to have. I'm going to see if I can find that on our live feed footage just to see that happen, because I've seen people slip and fall in different ways, but I've never seen everything tied together. Drink, cigar, fall, stuck. That's like everything that could happen happens.
And the best part is I didn't spill my drink and I didn't lose my cigar.
That's the sign of a true professional. True professional.
I don't like to disappoint anybody.
Kind of speaking of, being the true professional, is that, a lot of people, you won the NMC championship, and there might be a lot of viewers and listeners that, who is this guy? I mean, you've been racing for quite a while, especially on the West Coast. You guys have been pretty successful. Kind of walk us through what got you into racing and, what you've done in the sport.
Sure. Well, I've been going back to racing. Look at some of those pictures on your wall, brings back some memories for me growing up in Southern California. And Pomona was just about 20 minutes away from where I grew up in Arcadia. And my dad drag raced and his dad raced. Back then it was the El Mirage Dry Lakes when he was racing a 32 Ford Roadster. And then my dad started drag racing in the late 50s, early 60s. And so, motorsports and gearheads kind of run in our family's DNA. And Dad used to take me to Pomona and watch the Winter Nationals and the Winston Select Finals, and Hawaiian Punch, Funny Car, and of course all the great racers, Force, Amato, Warren Johnson, and Pro Stock. All these legends. Big Daddy Don Gartlitz and Don the Snake Prudhomme, all these guys that I watched growing up, I'd always been fascinated with horsepower. And growing up in a family business where we have heavy equipment, machinery, and running around the plant as a kid, all these things kind of tie together in a weird way with equipment and power and how things work and just being fascinated by it. And once I got my license when I turned 16, I had this vision that I was going to start racing cars. I had a couple older buddies of mine. The car culture in SoCal was still pretty big. You had imports starting to emerge. Of course, I'm still old school V8, push rod, let's make power. My dad was a Hemi guy. He had a double A alcohol dragster in the early 60s that he raced. That was Hemi powered, 3092 cast iron Hemi, as you would call it. And, ultimately, I just fell in the drag racing, had other buddies doing it. And I sucked my dad back in by the time I turned 18. He had seen me beating up on my daily driver and blowing up engines and, ringing pinions and, just beating on a car that was intended to get me from back and forth to school. And he finally capitulated and said, okay, let's go get a car together. So we bought our first car when I was 18, my freshman year of college. It's the 1969 Camaro that I raced on the West Coast in Outlaw 85. We started really getting more serious with drag racing after college. There was just kind of fun that we did here and there, did some bracket racing. And then after college, I started making some money and was able to afford to looking at how we can get more serious in the sport. And, Dad and I talked quite a bit about it. How could we use this as a marketing tool for our company as well, and generating awareness for our corporate brands and what we do, and creating a nice story and something that our employees could have fun with as well.
It's funny that the whole mechanical side of things, you see a lot of racers that they might not necessarily come from a car family, but mechanically minded people, you always look at something and be like, how can I improve this? How can I mess with it? And then it naturally divulges into, oh, well, let's make more horsepower with this. And it spirals out of control.
What I like to think, how our business or business in general, life, drag racing, there's a lot of things that are analogous when you look at continuous improvement. I don't wake up every morning and say, gee, I want to do a crappier job today than I did yesterday. It's about getting better each and every day. You don't go to the track and say, gee, I want to go slower. I don't want to set a record. I don't want to win a race. You go there wanting to beat everybody there. You respect them all, but you want to beat the what off of them and be the quickest and fastest and baddest person there. And I have the same approach with my business, with our racing team, with our family, and building up my kids to do better than I've done, and give them all the tools necessary and teach them about hard work and what you have to put in your heart and soul to be the best you can be. So it's fun because when I'm talking in board meetings and in business and working with our team, I can point to the racing side and use analogies from that. And we do the same thing with the race team. Unfortunately, we've got some pretty smart people who can understand it, as things are transitive and they relate to each other.
With the different kinds of drag racing out there, how did you get it? You saw a lot of success in the small tire racing. How did you kind of get up into that business?
I think it was just the thing that everybody was doing, and it looked like fun. And radial racing had been the rage, and we went from Outlaw 85 to basically X275 and 275 drag radial racing, and we did really, really well with that white Mustang that we had, and had some success on the West, and then bringing that to the East Coast NMCA, winning Street Outlaw. And I think the desire is to go faster, to get better, to challenge yourself. The only way you get better in competition is by going up against the best. Any sport I played growing up, from baseball to basketball, the way you measure yourself is against the best possible competition, and that's how you get better. And so that natural competitive type A personality desire to want to do better led us to what's next. So we looked at, obviously radio versus the world style formats, and what NMCA had with Radio Wars. We were building a car to go that direction. And you can kind of see the writing on the wall that having a multi-purpose car where you can run Pro Mod, which has been one of the fastest growing classes in, heads up drag racing and competitive drag racing. So we put all the chips on the table and said, let's go build a Pro Mod instead. And we sold that other car. fortunately, some of the parts that were in that car could transfer over and gave us a good foundation. And the pro model we've been racing now for what, three plus years. Certainly every year we're looking to improve. I mean, we were out testing last week at Bradenton, of course, with Jay. As you noted earlier, he's out there talking smack and posting time slips, and that's just Jay's personality. I prefer just to get it done. I know fans love somebody who can talk, and like Stevie Jackson comes to mind, and Jay too. I mean, those guys are great. You get them talking in a room or out in public. I do the same. I like to cut it up, but I'm more of a, I'm going to show you. I'm not going to talk about it as much. I'm just going to go out and do it and execute. That I think that just stems from how my parents raised me.
Oh, totally. I 100% am on board with that. It's funny you mentioned that. I saw a clip of on TikTok of it was Donald Cerrone and someone that he fought, UFC fighter, and this kid was just cutting into Donald, just talking a lot of trash, and you know, Cerrone was just like, "That's fine, but we're gonna settle this, in the octagon," and he just kind of said the same thing. I'm here to fight. I'm not here to talk. And then he went out and just beat this dude down severely. And to your point, that's the person that, the guys that talk a lot sometimes you don't necessarily worry about. It's the guys just sitting there silently nodding his head. That's the guy you need to worry about because they're going to go out and do whatever they got to do to win.
Absolutely. I mean, part of the game is talking, having fun. But to your point earlier, you got to back it up. And most of the time, I'm not going to talk if I can't back it up. When I do talk, I better back it up, because if I don't, I'm the one that looks like a fool ultimately. I'm like, you can't hit the ball if you don't swing at it, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you've got to take those swings. You've got to have a little bit of a fun personality, engaging others, but you got to execute. If you don't execute, what's the point?
And kind of going off the execution point of things, you had so much good success. Winning in small tire racing isn't easy. Winning like a series long championship isn't easy either. How did what you experienced in small tire racing get you ready to go into pro mod?
I think just a competitive mindset more than anything, but I mean, racing's racing. I mean, everybody, whether you race bracket or whether you race at a high level, winning a championship's not easy in any class, and especially over the course of a long season where anything can happen in the grind. But I think, having that competitive mindset, having that don't quit attitude and putting everything into it, and really surrounding yourself with great people ultimately. And whether it's racing, life, business, it all applies across the board. But you have to have that desire. It starts with you, and you have to set the tone personally. And so for me, I want to win. I've always wanted to win. My dad said I was one of the most competitive persons that he'd been around. And, being his son, you got to put the work in to get better, though. You just can't expect it to happen naturally either. So, for us, we've got a great team. I mean, Jason, Patrick, Cameron, John, Tim Lyons back behind the scenes. I've said this before, there's the people at the forefront that kind of get the accolades, and you see us high-fiving, but there's a lot of folks behind the scenes. And then I don't even talk about as much, there's other people that play a role, the sponsors. I mean, you do your best to plug them, but our employees back at home, working every day, doing their part that allows us to use this as a marketing tool in a way to present our company to those people that don't know who we are and have no clue what we do.
And I think it's interesting going into the pro mod world because, like you alluded to, the writing is on the wall. The radio versus the world Wabi. It's the exotic. To me, it's like what old school nitro racing was. It's crazy. You don't know what's going to happen to a point. A lot of stuff can happen. But to me, if you as a racer want to go out and get the most bang for your buck out of a 3,000 to 5,000 horsepower vehicle, run a pro mod, because you can spit and hit a pro mod race pretty much anywhere in the country anymore where you can run a pro mod doing something.
Absolutely. And that's so appealing because it allows you to pick a weekend. You can go run Northeast Pro Mod. You can go run Midwest. You can run NMCA. You can run PDRA. I mean, there's so much going on. Speaking of, my computer is doing something silly here. Hang on a second. I'm trying to.
Oh, we're still recording good on our end. I'll go off.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. I think I got it fixed here. Sorry about that.
Oh, no
Yeah,
worries.
you can definitely go so many places with the Pro Mod, which makes it so appealing. And the competition across the board is, everybody there, anyone can win. And that's what makes it, granted, there's teams that, they pull into the track. Hey, you're going to be battling with those guys. You're probably going to see them in the final. But anything can happen. Kind of like that old football saying, any given Sunday. That's why you play the game. That's why you run the race.
Oh, you see that at so many of these high level races where you have like stacked fields. Like, I use PDRA Pro Nitrous as an example, just because that, in my opinion, is the fastest collection of nitrous pro mod you're going to see anywhere. If you make the field at one of those races, it's tough. And there are no ducks anymore. You have to be at the top of your game. Otherwise, you're going to go home. And that, even as someone that might be qualified number one, they got to pay attention, because you never know when that number 16 guy is, they're going to be able to keep you honest and crack one off on you.
Absolutely. Qualifying in itself is quite an accomplishment, but that's just, part of the battle. I mean, obviously you want to be in the finals, winning a race, but a lot of times guys don't qualify. That's what makes Pro Mod so competitive and so tough. Any car is capable of winning any point in time.
And what makes it interesting too is you've raced on radials and slicks, and your car can race on radials and slicks. For you, I always like asking this question for people who have done both. What's it like, for you? What's the big differences between running on radials and slicks from a driver's point of view?
Well, I haven't driven the Pro Mod yet on radials. I'm looking forward to doing that, and getting that comparative feeling. When I race small tire radial stuff, certainly the car pretty much feels like once it's stuck and gone, it's staying straight. It's not going to move around a lot. When you run a big tire car, those things will dance. I mean, there's a lot of shimmying and a lot of stuff going on. Yep. And you feel it in the seat of your pants, but it's amazing when you see it on video. And sometimes you're like, wow, I didn't think it was moving around that much, and you're like, maybe I should have driven it out like that. It's a couple times you have that hindsight. It's 2020 when you look at it on video, but it's the constant challenge of learning of what to do and how far you want to push. I mean, that's the competitive side. I mean, plenty of times I've probably overdriven the car. I try not to, for a multitude of reasons.
Overdriving, to me, it seems like overdriving a slick tire pro mod car is a lot easier, again, because you think, you're used to it moving so much. You're like, oh, I got this. And before you can realize I don't got this is when all of a sudden you're facing the wrong wall and having to figure out in a half a second, how am I going to get out of this?
Yeah. The margin for error is definitely greater on the bigger tire, but just as quickly that margin can disappear if you're not paying attention. And of course, in 3.5 to 3.7 seconds, roughly, that's not a lot of time. Everything's happening so quickly. Your brain and your body are clearly not able to react as quick as what's going on, but you do your best that you can too. I've been fortunate. I haven't had any major incidents in my entire racing career, going back to when I started when I was 16. Been fortunate, had a few close calls. Definitely had the car get out of shape and go, yep, should have been out of that sooner. That competitive drive. Sometimes your brain is telling you no, and your body and your foot's still stuck to the floor, and you're trying to figure out how you can drive through it.
Yeah, it's definitely interesting when you are watching someone have one of those moments where the brain is not connected to the right foot, and you're hoping that they realize what's about to happen. And then it always ends in one of two ways. You're going, oh, that could have been bad, or oh, that's bad.
Definitely.
Yeah,
Well, I don't ever want to be the latter.
no,
I don't want to be the one like, well, that's bad. That wasn't a smart decision.
you don't want to be the reason Brian Lone says we're going to be down for a while. That's not on the list.
Yeah, I agree. I don't want to be the guy that soils up the track and puts racing down, because that's the one thing as a fan. You want to see constant action. You don't want to be sitting there seeing things blow up all the time, and seeing more of the tractor than you are of the race cars.
What's the wildest thing you've ever seen happen at the track? And I'll give my example first. I've seen a lot of crazy stuff, but at the NMRA finals this year, when that dude in that Coyote stock Mustang like jumped the wall and rode the wall like a skateboard grinding on a rail, that was a first. I can only imagine how awful that sounded to him inside the car and felt. But that was one of those ones where it's bad when they've called in the giant forklift skid steer to get a car off of that's bad.
I missed that one. I'm going to go back and look that up on the internet. What is the craziest thing I've seen? Well, I mean, I guess at the racetrack, or in the pits, because a lot of stuff happens off the track that's pretty fun and crazy.
We can get into the pits later. Let's go to the track first.
Yeah, at the track, gosh, I mean, I think it's some of the radial races where cars take flight. I mean, you'd never ever imagine that was even something possible. I mean, Stevie Jackson's crash comes to mind in the shadow. Dwayne Mills, of course.
I was on the starting line
at the other professional ranks. At the other professional ranks, I mean, just watching some of these nitro cars when they let loose, whole bodies are just disintegrating into the air. I mean, it's part of the volatility of what we do. Definitely, those are some of the craziest things that come to mind. I mean, the thought that you're suspended in air, which probably seems like an eternity. I remember watching Stevie's interview and talking to him about it, just how he felt like, he's doing the replay in his head. I mean, that's happening so fast, but it seems like it's an eternity. I can only imagine. I've been fortunate to go through that, and I don't ever plan on it. And when it happens, you react, I guess, as you do. I mean, your body and your brain can only react so quickly. But the thought of being suspended in air and not knowing where you're going to land and where you're going to land and how you're going to land, whether you're still on the track or you get outside, then you may hit a light pole. I mean, there are so many of those variables. Anything can go wrong in that situation that's not favorable for the person in the car.
Marcus Burt's one of those ones too that was the highest up. Like Dwayne's, when I saw that on the starting line, that looked crazy. But Marcus Burt's crash at South Georgia, I remember that because I was in the staging lanes. I had just finished up recording an interview, and you hear when the crowd goes crazy, something big's happening. I turn around, and it's South Georgia. When you're back a ways in the lanes and there's all those people there, you really can't see what's going on the track. Well, all I see is the top of heads, and then I see a Corvette above everybody's heads. I'm like, whoa, that's bad. That's a bad one. I grabbed the camera guy to get down there. Like, hopefully, this isn't going to be bad, but if it's not, we'll get an interview with him. And the car was somewhat intact. I'm like, he got lucky. He got real lucky.
Definitely. Well, any time you get into any accident and can walk away, you're very fortunate, because we're obviously putting, not so much our lives on the line, but we're obviously putting ourselves in danger. And I'm not trying to be dramatic about it, but anything can happen. And the more times you get on the racetrack, the higher the probability percentage of increase is that something's going to happen at some point. It's just inevitable. And we had at PDRA at the finals this past year, I was making a pass and burst panel let loose. Something happened inside the engine. Pulling off, not happy because it wasn't a clean hit. And all of a sudden it looks like somebody brought over, bananas Foster or flambe, and I've got flames coming out of the top of the burst panel, through the hood, and the car's on fire. and first thing I'm looking is it getting inside the car, and I'm just getting ready to pull the fire halon system, and that's going to cause a mess. And I'm yelling at the guy, "Hey, I'm on fire." And then I'm like, "Hey, just put it out, cover it, do something before I have to pull this darn fire system." Fortunately, the guy, responded time, and I'm on the radio simultaneously saying, "Guys, I'm on fire. Get somebody down here," because I don't think people realized what was going on at the time. So I'm on the radio talking with Cameron and Jason, and then of course they're talking, and all you hear is because everyone's talking over each other. Everyone's freaking out a little bit and try to keep yourself calm and cool in that situation. And, fortunately, it was more just paint and body damage and nothing major happened. But that's about the most excitement I've had, going down the track in a bad way, other than the car getting out of shape.
I tell people I like my drag races like I like my airplane flights, as uneventful as possible. I want it to be fun, but I don't want anything to make me have to worry about anything other than keeping the car going down the track.
It's funny. I have a thing I do. I always call my mom and my wife after I land, because I fly quite a bit for work when I travel. And, it's just common courtesy to tell a loved ones you arrive safely. And it's just part of what I do. And my mom, like, how was the flight? I said, it was fine. I made it. I'm safe. Or when someone's like, have a safe flight. Well, I'm not flying the plane. It's not my responsibility. Yeah. I'm just along for the ride.
I'm hoping the bus driver does his gig and everything works out.
Absolutely.
So you guys planning on a lot more radial racing this year with the car? Are you just going to, do a lot more of the Pro Mod gig?
So I think depending on how schedules and different organizations we're looking at racing this year and how we start the season, when we go to U.S. Street Nationals this week, we'll be on radials. We've been testing on radials, and it's fun and appealing. You can obviously go quicker and faster, and so that's always appealing. As part of that, I want to go quicker and faster mentality, and so we will be on radials, I think, a decent amount this year. And we'll, obviously start turning our focus as we get into late February, early March towards the big tire stuff. Just keep an eye on the calendar as to what radial races we could make and how it fits. At this point, my ability to race the season is pretty well shot from a competitive perspective, whether it's PDRA and NMCA. So Jason will be taking over the duties this year. And that was kind of partly the plan. It's funny how life works. You're driving home from dinner, and next thing you know, you're in a car accident and you didn't even see it coming, and you wake up in the hospital with a broken arm. So maybe that was a fun way of being reminded that my words were, after this season, I'll be taking a little bit of a step back, but I still want to race and focus on some of these one-off radial races or Pro Mod races like a shakedown or Donald stuff, and let Jason kind of take over behind the wheel for the competitive series stuff. And plus, you know what? He's earned it, quite frankly. The amount of work he and Patrick put in, they treat this like it's their car. Just, you wouldn't know whether I'm driving, he's driving. I mean, they treat it like it's their baby as well. And, we're very grateful and appreciative of that.
Kind of going off of that, we alluded to it earlier that, grinding out a championship at any level for 6+ races isn't easy, especially in heads up drag racing, because of what's required to do it. I mean, it's hard to make a heads up car perform consistently to win like that. What did it take for your team to win the NMCA title? And what was that experience like for you to battle in Pro Mod like that to win the title?
It's an incredible experience because you're racing at, whether it's NMCA, PDRA, any Pro Mod event, you're racing at, generally the upper echelon of racing and going against some of the toughest competitors. So that's an adrenaline rush in itself, knowing that you're pitting yourself against some of the toughest people out there in the sport that you race against. From a team perspective and putting together a championship winning program, it starts with the people you surround yourself with. And certainly you have to have a lot of luck. You got to be really patient. That's not something that I have much of. Patience has never been a virtue that I've possessed a lot of, because that competitive type A personality, I want it. I know I'm capable of doing it, and I'm going to do everything I can in my power to make it happen and surround myself with people who can be part of that team to help it, because you can't do it by yourself. So, especially last year, when you think about 2020 and what a challenge it was, in a lot of ways, I am so grateful and surprised that any organization could run a series, quite frankly, with everything going on. Hats off to all of the people at NMCA, PDRA, Midwest Pro Mod, even though we didn't race there, or Northeast Pro Mod or NHRA. the challenges itself, whether it was money, whether it was people concerned, whether it was states being shut down in different ways, winning a championship in 2020 was pretty special. Winning a championship in general is not easy for anybody. Like I said earlier, any class. It doesn't matter if you're a bracket guy or running in, top fuel or, funny car or pro mod. That grind is tough. There's stuff that people don't realize that go on behind the scenes, the planning, the preparation and the coordination of logistics and, getting motors rebuilt after every race. And, no different than what any racer goes through. For those that don't maybe see it, all the stuff behind the scenes is just as critical as what goes on once you pull into the track. And it's kind of, if you're not prepared, if you don't show up prepared and ready, all the stuff you do leading up to that, you won't be successful. You have to do everything behind the scenes and show up ready to go. And that's just as much work, if not more, than actually being there physically racing a car once you're there.
And I think what also makes organizations like the NMCA's championship interesting, and PDRA too probably, is that it's national, but it's almost like a regional kind of series too, because you get guys that you don't know who's going to show up to an event. Like, you'll have your people are going to be there, but you never know when someone like Ricky Smith's going to need to do some testing and he rolls up. And that makes it a challenge to race against people like that, because even though their car is not 100% set up for 8th mile trim, it's still going to be fast and you're going to have to contend with them.
Most definitely. And, at the end of the day, we talk about this, Jay and I talk about it quite a bit. You're only racing yourself ultimately at the end of the day. You can't really concern yourself with who's there or who you're racing against. Respecting them is a whole different thing. Once you're in your car, it's just you and the tree. Doesn't matter what the other guy's doing, or other girl's doing, or who you're racing against. You can't let any of that get in your head. If anything, you got to block it all out. And if you don't, you may not have the stomach for all this. You've got to focus and concentrate on what you're doing. Know that you've put the best possible car out there and product that you have, and then you go let it all hang out and see what happens. I mean, how many times on paper we should have won a race, we didn't win a race, whether I red lit, I'm guilty of that. Car spun, something happened mechanically. I was too slow on the tree. I mean, so many variables, right? And it's funny how drag racing, you have to have a short-term memory about it. It's kind of like golf, which people might laugh, especially some of the folks listening to this later, like, what are you talking about golf for? How's that relate to drag racing? Well, it really doesn't, obviously, but you got to forget about your shot. No matter how good or bad it was, there's always the next shot. And just like no matter how bad you did or how great you did racing, there's always the next race. There's always the next round. Even if when you lose, then there's the next race. You show up the next time, you learn from that, and you get better, and you go out and try to win the next time.
And, to keep that going a lot of times and to win at a high level, you got to have help and you've got to have sponsors, which leads me into, I've got to thank our sponsors on the show because we've taken things up a level. This episode is brought to you with the help of Performance Distributors, the company that allows you to feel the difference, not just ignite a spark. What does that mean exactly? Well, their ignition systems are designed and manufactured under the most stringent of guidelines. In fact, the owner, Steve Davis, told us their systems are designed as if they were running them in their own vehicles. Well, because they do run them in their own vehicles at the company. One of their products you might already know of for them is their line of DUI distributors, the first and one of the calibrated timing curve systems with instant throttle response that eliminate the engine damaging detonation. For those of you with late model vehicles, their sultans of spark ignition coils are based on the DUI technology, so they can accommodate a wide range of plug wraps and firing more voltage. So check out performancedistributors.com for all of your ignition needs. That's performancedistributors.com for what they do for a living. They put in their own vehicles. And to me, having sponsors on the show is important because it helps drive our show forward. It helps drive racing forward. It shows why, as an industry, I think, this too, that partnerships are important in drag racing, period, end of discussion.
Absolutely. Well, partnerships in business and drag racing and in life, and having the right people to surround yourself with, most definitely. And we've got some great sponsors and people that work with us in our team. Without them, we wouldn't be as successful as we are. I mean, it's simple. If I could run my business by myself, and this is going to sound greedy or selfish, then I can keep all the money for myself. But it's not feasible. It's not possible. You're not going to generate success. And of course, to get better, you surround yourself with people that are smarter and better than you, and build a great team.
And I think too in the performance industry too is you see all kinds of companies, and it's funny, performance distributors. I just set up a deal with them where I'm going to be running some of their products on a car that I'm building, and it's because they work. And that's number one. Number two, the owner Steve, I talked to him about this stuff, and it's cool when you work with these companies that they are from enthusiasts that want to do this. They get excited about what you're doing and they want to help. And even at the level of a pro mod deal, it's important to have people like that because they're excited and want to help push your program forward.
Absolutely. Well, unless you can do everything yourself in-house, you've got to surround yourself and partner with, whether it's somebody on the engine building side, like a Jimmy Rector who works with us, and the folks at Newton Race Engineering, and Daryl and Renee and the team over there, to ProCharger and what they're doing to obviously take centrifugal superchargers and continue to push the boundaries, and make a better product, and make a quicker and faster product. Whether it's Craig at Liberty Transmissions, obviously what we do with Haltech and Jason and Patrick, and trying to be on the cutting edge on fuel engine management stuff. It is a nonstop process of continual improvement. I can't say that enough. I'll be a broken record until the day I die. If you're not trying to get better at everything you do in life, then don't complain about the results when they don't go the way you want.
It's funny you mentioned surrounding yourself with good people, and that's something I wanted to touch on too. Is you surrounded yourself with the guys from PTP Racing, Pro Charger, and all these other companies. Maybe some of our racers out there would like to hear your take on what's it like to surround yourself, or why is it so important to surround yourself with those people? What do they do to really help push your program along?
Well, I mean, like anything, right? You can't do it yourself. You could do as much as you can, but I'm not an expert in everything. I mean, I know what I know, and I'm always looking to learn and get better. I have that desire and that hunger to do that. But you seek out those who have that knowledge and experience too. And putting yourself in that position to tap into that knowledge base, there's that strength in numbers mentality when you have the right people on the team, and that collective knowledge base and experience and wisdom that's acquired through years of doing something. And so you get a Jason Lee. I mean, to your point, he's won championships. People may not know it because he hasn't been behind the wheel, because he was building part-time racing. I joke with him, is he going to change it to FTP, from part-time performance to full-time performance? Because that's what he does. And that's what Patrick does. I mean, Patrick was in the mortgage business, right? He was selling mortgages and had a mortgage company. Jason was working for BP, overseeing convenience store operations in the Michigan and Ohio market. People don't know where some folks come from and how they acquire their overall knowledge and how they parlay that into something else. I run a meat processing company, and that's where the whole mechanical side of this comes from, and my interest in loving that, and how we've parlayed that into using drag racing as a medium, an opportunity to promote and market the company. And then you go out and you pick up the right, smart, knowledgeable people to help you put together a winning program.
And what's interesting is I don't know if enough people pay attention to this, but you'll see, if you're using a company like AFR's heads and they're wanting to know more, get your experience on it, you'll see their reps in pits talking with racers, what's this doing? How's this working? And then they want to be able to partner. Like, you succeeding is important to them because you're able to do things that they can't do. And I think a lot of racers don't understand that they need to really, they might not get something from free from a company, but working with that company can maybe provide you with some knowledge that they will be happy to share with you to help you along the way.
Definitely. Well, any point of a successful program is that R&D process, and partnering with those that can, if they're not going to give you the part for free, at least give you some of their knowledge, and working together is how you can make it better. And of course, pushing back on them to make it better, because we've got to have those partners who are on board with the idea of going quicker, going faster, and continually improving and making the best possible products so our car can perform at the highest level every single time down the track. We've made that commitment. I've made that commitment as a team, as a team owner and, CEO of our company. I have to set the tone. And then you hope others catch that fire with you and they buy into the concept of working together and performing at the highest level. But if it doesn't start at the top, then it's not going to start at all, ultimately, in my opinion.
I talked with different racers. They've changed combinations, gone to different vehicles. And it's always funny when you talk to guys that go and switch to a blower car, specifically a Pro Charger car. What's it like to drive one of those machines? I want to get your take on that. So maybe I could tell the stories I've heard from other people, but what's it like sitting inside one of those very angry sounding vehicles?
I mean, it's an adrenaline rush like no other. And they're rowdy, they're fun, they're not easy. I guess we make it look easy at times. Sometimes we don't. Sometimes you look pretty silly out there. Good thing we can laugh at ourselves most of the time. But I mean, it's just total exhilaration, the noise. I mean, just that raw feeling of power and the acceleration that goes on and how loud and rowdy it is. I mean, you can't really hear much going on inside the cockpit there. I mean, I've never driven a turbo car, at least not, racing wise. A car on the street is different. I love driving a blower car. I mean, I've had every combination other than turbo in a race car. I started out with naturally aspirated, then nitrous, and then went to centrifugal supercharger, specifically Pro Charger. And they are so much fun. And Jason and I, feel the same way about it. It's what led to us to go pro mod racing with a Pro Charger. It was something that we had been thinking about when we were doing small tire radial stuff. And how cool would it be to put together a Pro Charger Hemi, style platform and put it in a pro mod and see what we can go out and do and if we can be competitive with it.
The reason I ask is that Don Lamana went from, twin turbo Fox body Mustang to his Pro Charge car. And I asked him, I'm like, what's the difference between these two? He goes, it is so damn loud and it shakes everything. He said, after every run, we have to check the whole car over because we're starting to figure it out. What did it shake loose this time? And from someone that's on the outside of the car, I could attest that like a Pro Charger car through, depending on the exhaust, especially zoomies, I could be wearing my military grade earmuffs. Doesn't matter. It's still going to physically hurt me. Like I wince when they do burnouts.
Good. That means we're doing our job right.
Yeah. Like Phil Hines. I always joke with Phil, I'm like, Phil, do you really hate your valve train that much that you spin that car so hard that I'm waiting to see things shoot out from underneath it? He's like, oh, it's just how it is. I'm like, it's awful, Phil. It's awful.
His car is loud no matter what. Sometimes I think it's louder than some of the pro mods out there when he's doing his burnout. It's pretty funny.
Oh,
having raced against Phil, in Street Outlaw a couple of years ago when we were on our white Fox body Mustang, there were times where I was doing a burnout and I couldn't even hear my own damn car.
No, you can't. I've heard him in testing, like line up like at Ducks Race with like a screw blown Hemi Pro Mod, and you can't hear the Pro Mod doing a burnout. It's gnarly.
Pro Chargers are a lot of fun, and they're a great repeatable combination once you start to iron them out. You don't get turbo people problems, but there are definitely Pro Charger problems, and it's more of a joke. It's not that Pro Charger is the problem, but like any combination has its nuances, right? And things happen, stuff breaks, you get frustrated. When you're pushing things at this level, you're going to have things go wrong, whether it's an engine, whether it's a transmission, whether it's the dump valve and the darn converter platform not working properly on the trans. I mean, so many moving parts. So it's not just one thing. And when it goes wrong, yeah, you get pissed and you want to figure it out, especially if you're in a competitive round. But again, that ability to not quit and get back at it and fix the problem and go out again, and then all of a sudden you make your quickest pass. I remember back, God, this is probably, I think 2014 when we won the NMCA Street Outlaw West Championship in our white Fox body. It's the last race of the year. You know, any three of us can win. I think it was James Lawrence, Ryan Jones, and myself were all kind of battling it out for the number one spot. And there was a string of cars in front of us that crashed, like back to back to back. And I'm sitting, you know, behind the water box in the car. Now you kind of feel like you're getting iced, right? You're sitting in the car, it's 5 minutes, and it's 10 minutes. And, you know, another car crashes. You're like, wow, you know, what the heck's going on here, man? I remember getting on the radio. I was telling Jason Cameron, I don't think we should make a hit. Let's wait until the next round. I mean, it doesn't seem right. No, you're going to be fine. Stop overthinking it. Because I definitely like to overanalyze things. And so I was like, all right, fine. So go do a burnout, start making the pass. Wheel speed starts to get a little bit too much. You can see it on the data logger on the drive shaft. You know, the drive shaft speed was just getting too crazy. And the groove at Fontana is pretty narrow. And the car just got slightly out of the groove. And man, that thing sucked me right into the wall. Started getting a little wonky. And I had just kissed the rear quarter panel and the bumper and the wing and banged against the wall. And then it shot me across the other lane. Thank God. I think I was racing Ryan Jones Toaster at the time in his 64 Nova, and he was already out in front. Thank God. So I go into the other lane. I was able to pump the brakes and magically make it from not going head into the other lane, into the retaining wall, and then did like a 180 and spun the car the other direction and stopped facing the starting line in the middle of the track. And man, I was pissed. I was like, I knew it. I'm on the radio. I'm yelling, yes, I told you guys we shouldn't have made a hit. Thankfully, the car was okay. I was fine other than being really upset. I get out of the car and they check me out. The guys took the car back to the pit and they're banging out the body panels and checking the car out. And Buster from, who worked for NHRA on the West Coast, he came over and looked at the car and said it was fine and didn't have to pull the cert tag and, allowed us to continue. And we were trying to be the first car on the West Coast to go sixes in the quarter mile. I think Russell Stone and those guys did it in NMCA, Street Outlaw in the East Midwest side. So we had just been close, and we went like 700 or something like that. And we just missed that 699. And then we wrecked the car, and we're still racing for a championship. We get it fixed. I jump back in, last qualifier, 698. We got it. And so, I mean, that in itself was well worth it.
Yeah, it's awesome when you can bounce back from something like that. It's hard for people that don't do it to understand what it's like when you can accomplish something like that after a lot of bad stuff's happened, because it can affect you a little bit in how you perform and what you got going on. Especially, I've been in that situation too, where you're sitting there getting ready to make a hit and you see a lot of bad stuff happening in front of you. And some guys will start to think about it, or you'd be like the guy that I used to crew for. And I look back and he's asleep in the car. He's not even he's like, whatever, just wake me up and we got to run. And it puts you in an interesting position on how you're going to react to that.
Absolutely. Now I've been known to take naps in the car too. Sometimes you just kind of sit in the car and you got your helmet on and you're waiting and you're just kind of taking your deep breaths and decompressing and getting your mental game on and getting ready to fully focus on what's going on and fleshing everything out of your head. And I've definitely been one to know that I've got stuff going on all the time up here. I mean, the brain never stops working, whether I'm thinking about work or what's going on back at home with my wife and kids, or everything else going on. But at some point you got to block it all out and you got to just focus solely on making that pass down the racetrack. If you let too much stuff creep into your mental headspace, you're going to be distracted ultimately. And the last thing you want to be is distracted driving a 3,500 plus horsepower race car down the track.
Yeah. That little skirmish with the wall, is that the most gnarly thing you've had happen, then keep racing that day? Or is there other things where you've torn stuff up and kept going, where most sane people would have been like, let's pack it in and call it a day?
I mean, I've had multiple part failures at a racetrack. I remember one year when the F1Xs were having a hard time holding together, and it was at Streetcar Super Nationals. We're running the white radial Mustang and competing in Wild Street, which is their 275 small tire class. And I had reached out to guys that I knew that had additional blowers, and literally I think Dan Shonick, he sent me one overnight from Minnesota, and then I flew a guy in because it was too late to put it on a plane to come. So he checked in a F1X as his luggage, and flew from Baltimore, Maryland to Las Vegas. And I paid for him to come out, all for a minimal payday, but more about the competitive side. So that was pretty crazy, to fly a guy from the East Coast just so you can get another blower so you can keep racing and having the parts you need to compete. We've done all sorts of stuff. Drive in the middle of the night from streetcar and take a head down to Jason Pettis to get it welded and fixed because we had an issue, to flying parts in. I mean, you hear stories from other people doing the same thing. It's all about that competitive drive to ultimately win. And if you're at the racetrack and you have a chance, then give yourself that chance. Don't quit. And unless there's an obvious reason why you shouldn't do it, then what are you there for? It's like, you don't go to the beach to go skiing. Go to the beach to hang out, get in the water and have a good time. So you do it. You don't go to the golf course to play basketball. You go there to play golf. So do what you're intending to do when you're there, and do everything you can within your power to make it happen.
Racers, I think, are some of the people that are willing to go to unhealthy levels to get to make the next round. Like I've been a part of a team where we've told a guy, well, I know you've been up for 10 hours already, but now you're gonna have to drive through the night to go buy a part that we need 3 states away. Here's a gas card. Here's some Red Bull. Godspeed, my friend. You can take a nap tomorrow. And you send them out the door. Or, you've heard the stories of guys like this. It's not the first time you said that. I've heard of guys checking like car parts in on a flight. I've heard of guys bringing like Brad Anderson cylinder heads on commercial flights. So imagine all the other people on the plane, they're bringing their carry-ons, and homeboy's got a Brad head. He's like, I'm just going to put this up here.
Yep. I check in.
Yeah.
I've always had fun when you go through TSA and they're like scratching their head going, what is this thing? Don't worry about it. It's just a car part.
Yeah. Oh, it's South Georgia. Every time I fly out of that little Valdosta airport, I get the super secret fun TSA exploration, deal with my camera gear, because I've got a camera gear bag, and they always pull me off to the side. What's this? It's a left-handed smoke shifter. It's a camera. What does it look like? They go through the bag, pull everything out, look at it like it's some sort of magical device, and you just roll with it. It's like, all right, whatever. I'm not doing anything illegal this time. We'll be fine.
Yeah. God bless them for doing their jobs.
Yeah, it's funny too. Sometimes you go to a track that doesn't normally see like a heads up car, and it's always fun to see a confused tech person looking at their car. Like they'll look at something and be like, you could just tell that they're struggling with what's going on here.
Yeah, well, a good learning experience for them then for the next time it happens.
Yeah, I've been in that situation where we've had to explain to a tech person what something is and why it's okay. And I remember at one point we were at a track and they said, "Man, this car's got a lot of bars in it. We don't see many around here like this." I'm like, "Oh, it's gonna be fun making a pass here. I'm sure that their prep is top notch."
Yeah. Yep.
It's like the track in Southern Ohio. I'm sure you've seen the pictures. I raced that in college, where at KD Dragway, where the shutdown area, it actually goes uphill. Have you ever seen those pictures of that track?
I have not. The one that I think comes to mind, obviously Holly Springs at the end, where guys are doing, circular shutdown to get off the track. But that Verona drag strip, where I've raced there a couple times, and literally it's Dukes of Hazzard at the end. If you don't, the gravel shutdown, where you're supposed to stop the car. I don't think it's more than 15, 20 feet long. And maybe it's longer than that, but it doesn't look it.
No.
And, if you don't successfully stop in that gravel pit, you are going off the end of a cliff.
I heard that we did when I was out in California for Horsepower Wars this year. We were filming out there, and I always heard about how short the shutdown was. So I I'd never been to that part of Southern California, like out in the country like that. Usually it's just at our, our home office. So I took a walk down the return road there, which is an interesting nature walk, and you can hear different wildlife, some with rattles on their tails. So I'm like, I'm just going to stay on the pavement. So I get out there and I start walking, and literally, you walk to the edge of the net. There's some Hoosier tires, and then it's Thelma and Louise if you go off the end of that.
Absolutely is. It's certainly a little scary knowing that if something goes wrong. I think there was a story where a racer unfortunately had a heart attack, and I believe he actually died in his car going down the track. And as he had the heart attack, he's foot still on the gas pedal apparently, and he went right off the end of that Aperona. I think it's a true story.
Oh,
It's just sad the guy passed away. Obviously, it goes without saying, and hopefully, if he had passed away before he went off the cliff, because God, I would hate to think that anybody would ever go through that experience.
the terror, it was funny. The week after we left, there was someone had an A fuel altered their testing of all things, an A fuel altered, and he went into the gravel and stopped right before the net. But I'm like, that has there's a lot of bad feelings you can have at a racetrack, but knowing you're running out of real estate, you're going to go in the sand trap's bad. But knowing that after you clear the sand trap, it's just it's ET time. I couldn't do it.
Yeah, that reminds me. We were testing at North Star Dragway on radials when we were running some of the bigger F3 121 130 blowers on our small block LS stuff in our white Fox body Mustang. And we're making a hit. Car's rolling pretty good. I think we went 177, 176 to the eighth, and that car at 3,200 pounds. That's moving back. This is 2016 maybe. I think we went like a 103 60 foot, went like a 417 or something like that. And I go to pull the chutes, right? And you don't feel anything. You don't feel the ass, and just grabbing you. And on the radio, chutes didn't deploy. Yep, you don't have chutes. And North Star's got a decent shut off, but it's still short. And these cars don't have analog brakes, and so you're on, you're off, you're on, and you're off, and you get to a point where you hear the and the wiggle, and then you gotta get out, and then you keep applying off and on. And the EMS guys were sitting in the ambulance, and he came down after I got this thing off the track. Got lucky. Last turn off, it's dark, you can't see a thing. I don't know how I didn't end up into the pit there, but I made this hard left. I don't know how fast I was going, turning off the track. And he comes down to check on me before the guys show up, and he goes, "Man, you were coming in really hot there, buddy." He's like, "We didn't think you were going to make it." I was like, "Yeah, neither did I." Talk about being lucky. But yeah, that was pretty radical. That was gnarly. That was when you don't expect it type of thing. And unfortunately, I didn't overreact.
Yeah, that's the thing where, I'm getting ready to drive. Both my cars are going to be significantly faster than what they were coming up. And I'm already trying to prepare myself mentally and ask people, what do I do when this how do you react to these situations? Because you don't necessarily get put in them all the time as a driver, but you need to be ready. And it's the same thing, if something bad happens. I watched a video of a dude down at the GTR Cup this past weekend that it had the intake blew off the car, sheared it completely off, blew the hood off. The car was on fire, and he wasn't getting out. And that's kind of scary. And they interviewed him after. He said, "Oh, my Hans got hung up inside the car." Again, that needs to be something as a driver you got to prepare for, because it can very well happen. And it also made me realize I am not going to wear a Hans that's bolted to my body. I'm getting one of those ones that's just on my neck. So if I got to get out of that car in a hurry, that thing's not going to hold me up.
Wow. Yeah, no, that's crazy. I mean, thank God he was okay. Thank God he was able to get out. And I mean, when you think about safety gear, obviously you can never skimp.
No.
You can't put a price tag on your life when you're out there competing at this level.
The best line I've ever heard was a sales guy told to one of my friends when he was kind of like balking at the cost of an SFI 15 jacket. He said, "When's the last time you heard of a $500 skin graft?" And then he was like, "Good point. Think I'll pay that for that jacket now, please."
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, some people get sticker shock, but when you start to put it in context, you recognize that, yep, that's worthwhile. That's a worthwhile investment.
Yeah, you hope something doesn't happen, but that way when it does happen, you're like, man, I'm glad I was ready for that.
Absolutely.
Well, Eric, our time here on the show is coming to an end. I like to give my guests their chance to impersonate John Force and thank all their sponsors and tell people where they can be found at. So I'll turn the floor over to you, and you can tell people where they can find your team on social media, sponsors. Thank you got to thank, and do what you got to do, my friend. So it's all you.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks, buddy. Well, let's start with all the sponsors. I mean, obviously our company, Coast Packing, which is our headline sponsor. All of our employees there and everybody at the company, thank you for all your hard work that allow us to go out drag racing and use this to promote the company. We couldn't do it without you, and I'm so grateful and appreciative for your hard work. On the actual automotive racing side, certainly Jason Lee, Patrick Barnhill, PTP, and Tim Lyons at Lyons Custom Motorsports, Daryl at Noonan, and the whole team at Noonan, of course, Pro Charger, Jimmy Rector, Craig at Liberty Transmission, Steve at Quick Drive, all the other sponsors. If I missed anybody, I'm sorry. Thank you for what you do for supporting our program so we can go out there and do you proud. Our team, Cameron Hensley, who's our crew chief, John Ergo. Thanks, Trucker, for getting the car back and forth to the track safely and working hard when you're there. And being kind of the team mascot along with Ben Liddell, Ox, Michael O'Donnell, and Nick Dumbo Strobing. And we've got a great group of guys, and we couldn't do it without their support. They all care about the program tremendously, and we all have a lot of fun doing this together. Of course, my family, my wife, my kids, and my mom and my dad for supporting this crazy habit we have and being patient. And as my wife would tell me, she goes, "It's a good thing you've won enough races, because if you sucked at this, I'd really be pissed at you for the time you spend away from our family." So, I'm grateful that I've got a great family that loves me and supports me and appreciates what we're trying to do here and how much fun we have. And I'm looking forward, as my kids get older, to having them come to the track and participate, just like I used to go with my dad, and sharing those memories together. And thank you to you and the staff at Dragzine and doing a great job covering the racing industry and what we do. And thank you for having the passion, and thanks for having me on the show. This has been a lot of fun. I'm really appreciate it.
No problem, man. It was great to have you on the show, and I'll see you this weekend in Bradenton.
Absolutely, buddy. Have a safe flight. We'll see you in a few days.